Welcome, everybody. My name is Nina Jane, and I'm the director of the Ashland Public Library. I'm really thrilled to be here because I love Ashland Is United, and I think they do such good work. So we partnered with them to bring this program about Sri Lanka, the flag and its history and its culture, which is, I think, going to be really fascinating. So I'd like to thank the Friends of the Ashland Library who support all of our programming, and I'm going to hand it right over to Rajashree Ghosh, who's going to tell you a bit about herself and about Ashland Is United, and then we'll be on to the races. So enjoy the conversation. I hope you learn a lot. I'm sure I will. So Rajashree, it's all you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Meena. We're thrilled that Ashland Is United is partnering with the Ashland Public Library to celebrate Sri Lanka. A little bit about Ashland Is United. The organization aims to build and strengthen bridges where they don't yet exist by educating and exposing people to new information and ideas. Learning from each other, we feel, promotes true inclusivity in our community because we don't have answers to everything ourselves. This event is part of our flag project, which is titled, This is Ashland, Raise Your Flag. This was approved by the Select Board last year, and the project pays homage to Ashland's evolving demographic landscape. Celebrating different nations represented in our town, we believe provides engagement with different cultures, arts, music, and really a deeper dive into understanding immigration journeys and so on. We can either raise a flag or develop a program or do both. If you're interested in celebrating a country, please reach us at ashlandisunited@gmail.com so we may tell you more about this. Today belongs to Sri Lankans and those who wish to learn about the beautiful country. It's auspicious and historically significant day. With that, I request my colleague and Ashland Is United member, Shavindra Kure, to take it over. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajashree. So hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Shavi Kure. I've been a resident of Ashland for about 13 years now. And I'm really thrilled to be, talking about Sri Lanka today because that's where I was born and raised. I lived there for the first 19 years of my life, and I have lots of fun memories. We still go there almost every year because my mom still lives there. My husband's mom lives there. And we want to make sure that our kids have a really good relationship with the country, that they know about it. It's not just some distant land somewhere. So that's why we try to go every year. Of course, with COVID, things kind of that mess things up. But from this year onwards, we are planning on going every year again. So anyway, today is actually a very special day, just as Rajashree mentioned. And the reason is because it's the 75th Independence Day of Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka gained independence on February 4th, 1948, and from the British. They were everywhere, right? So anyway, it's been 75 years. We've had a lot of ups and downs. And, maybe some people living there might say that there have been more downs than ups, but I think there's still lots of reasons to celebrate. So anyway, today is really a moment for us to learn a little bit more about Sri Lanka, because I think everybody here has heard of Sri Lanka, but probably you don't know much about it. So it's really a time for us to have a conversation about the country. So we have a very special guest with us today, Chitral de Mel. And I'm going to introduce him in a minute. But first, what I'd like to do is to show you a couple of videos, just, introducing Sri Lanka. And then I'm going to let our wonderful speaker talk to you for about 10 to 15 minutes. And then I'm going to open up the floor, for questions, and we can hopefully have a lively discussion. So that's the plan. So I am going to share my screen with you. And then we can get started. Actually, just give me a second. I should have shared my sound as well. Make it better. All right, so I think I'm going to take this opportunity now to introduce our speaker. Chitral de Mel is originally from Sri Lanka and had come to the United States in 1989 with his wife Vyonni. Chitral has received a Master of Divinity degree from the Episcopal Divinity School in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and a Master of Science degree from the Clarion University in Pennsylvania. He has completed a Diploma in Leadership and Nonprofit Management at Boston University. Chitral was ordained as a priest in the Episcopal Diocese of Massachusetts in 2004. Presently, he serves as the Rector at the Church of the Good Shepherd in Dedham, Massachusetts. Chitral was a civil rights lawyer in Sri Lanka from 1984 to 1989, specializing in human rights. He had worked with refugees and asylum seekers in Massachusetts and detained immigrants in New England prisons as an advocate and an immigration consultant from 1998 to 2004. I think also as a Sri Lankan in the community, it's important to us that he was the first president of he was a founding president of the Sri Lankan Association of New England that was started in 1988. The Sri Lankan Association of New England actually is basically the main organization that connects Sri Lankans in New England. They organize lots of events. They collect funds for charities in Sri Lanka. So I think that's one of the reasons why he's probably the best person to talk about Sri Lanka. He's also the founder of the Boston Lanka Media, the premier Sri Lankan media network in the United States. He lives in Douglas, Massachusetts with his wife Vyonni and daughter Chirusha. His wife Vyonni is also wonderful. I know her very well. So that's a little bit about our speaker. So Chitral, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Thanks, Shavi, for that kind introduction. I'm happy to be with you all, and especially want to thank you all for inviting me to talk a little bit about Sri Lanka on this special day, and we are celebrating our 75th Independence Day. And I just also want to share my appreciation for the Ashland community for honoring Sri Lanka on this special day, as well as acknowledging the origins of your residents in Ashland as well. So let me give you more like a teaser of Sri Lanka, because within 10-15 minutes, obviously, cannot talk comprehensively about Sri Lanka. Hopefully, this will arouse some curiosity to continue to listen to some of the Sri Lankan news when you hear or read some of the Sri Lankan news, as well as to go and look in the web as well. So obviously, some of you already know, Sri Lanka is an island nation in the Indian Ocean, formerly known as Ceylon. And I think some of you probably have heard Ceylon tea, one of our major brand. And it said that, again, I don't know how accurate historically, it was said that when during the American Revolution, when the Boston Tea Party, then they put tea chest into the ocean, that was Ceylon tea they put. So that's because the British got mostly the tea from Ceylon, and obviously that's the one they import to America as well. So could be right. Anyway, just then in 1972, obviously we got our independence in 1948. In 1972, we changed into Sri Lanka. The official title of the country's name is Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka. Of course, it's democratic because we have the three branches, the executive, legislative, and judiciary. We have executive president, we have a parliament, and we have an independent judiciary. And of course, we have the elections. We have every 4 years, we have elections to elect the president, and then for the parliament, and then we have local government elections and provincial council elections. So there's a electoral system where we elect our representatives. So it's a democratic. And also it's could say the socialist in a way, because mostly it's a welfare state, I would say, because education is free from grade 1 up to university level, and health is free. And then there's a lot of welfare systems built into the society. Of course, that's the major challenge for us now because the expenses is so high, more than the income the country getting. So there's a issue there, but still you could call it as a welfare state, or there's the socialist components are there. And it's a republic because we obviously, as Shavi said, we were under British and we got our independence in 1948. And although we got the independence, we were part of the Commonwealth. We were under British crown, not like more like a nominally that time. There was a representative of the British crown who was the Governor General, and then later became the President, constitutional head of the country. But in 1972, we cut off from that, and then we became a republic in 1972. So it's a republic. So Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka. And also, it's a small country, as we know, 22 million. It's a small island, about 25,000 square miles. You can say closer, little larger than the state of West Virginia. And so it's a small nation, but it's a high population rate. And talking about the Sri Lankan flag, I know you have probably seen the Sri Lankan flag. You can see a flag where a lion, golden color lion carrying a sword in a maroon color background that represents the Sinhalese community, the majority community. And then you will see 4 gold bow leaves in saffron color, representing the Buddhist religion. It's a predominantly a Buddhist country. And then you see 2 stripes, orange and green, representing the minority communities, this Tamil community as well as the Muslim community. Orange color represents Tamil community, and the green color representing the Muslim community. Let me very briefly talk a little bit more about Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has been called in many different names, but some call Sri Lanka as a pearl in the Indian Ocean. Pearl in the Indian Ocean. When you think about it, it's an appropriate name. Of course, it's in the Indian Ocean. It's an island in the Indian Ocean. But if you look at the pearl, it's more like a pearl. If you look at the map, and also given the richness and the beauty of the pearl, it's more appropriate for Sri Lanka. We have the beauty. You saw the beauty, the landscape, the tea estates and all that, the mountains and everything, and the beautiful beaches. We are sometimes we are proud to say that we have one of the most beautiful beaches, the golden sand beaches in Sri Lanka. And of course, you will see the gems. most precious stones in Sri Lanka. It is said that when you have this British crown, they use Sri Lankan gems in the British crown also. So that's there. But more importantly, the people. If you should think about the people, they are always smile, although people are going through so much difficulties economically and all these things. But still you see, if you see somebody, you see the smile, the beautiful smile in their faces, and the diversity of Sri Lanka. We have four, I think I would say the Sinhalese community is the majority community in Sri Lanka, about 70% Sinhalese community. And then we have Tamil community, about 12%, and the Muslim community, another 10%. And then we have a small group from descendants of Dutch, we call Burger, and then little tiny communities from different ethnic backgrounds. And then we also have people who are practicing four major living religions in the world. The Buddhism, that's the majority practice Buddhism, about 70% of Sri Lankans Buddhists. It came from India in 2nd century BCE. Probably you know there are two streams, mainly the Theravada Buddhism and the Mahayana practice in Japan and other Asian countries. But Theravada, that's the Buddhism stream that we practice in Sri Lanka. And then we have Hinduism. It's also old religion came in same time, the 2nd BC century. And then we have Islam, and then of course Christianity. Christianity, of course, came when the occupation began. In 1500, the Portuguese came and they captured our coastlands, and then of course with them came the Roman Catholicism. And then later, after 1 century, the Dutch came and they captured the coastland from Portuguese, and with that we got the Dutch Reformed Church. And then in 1800, the British came and they captured the whole country. And with that, we got the Anglican religion, and now we call the Episcopal religion. And so that's that. Although as Christians, we would like to say that Christianity came much earlier, because we have the historical evidence that Christianity was in Sri Lanka in 500 AD. In other words, probably you know this St. Thomas went to India and then to preach the gospel. And there's historical evidence to show that St. Thomas's disciples had visited Sri Lanka in 500 AD that time. And because there's some historical evidence that there's a Nestorian crosses we find in Sri Lanka dated 500 AD. So that's another thing, but it was not spread that time. But that's how when British and the Portuguese, the Dutch, we got the Christianity. So that's kind of the major religions. And then our country was also called the teardrop of India. Teardrop of India. It's if you have seen the map, it's in the southern tip of India, and it's more like a teardrop, really. If you look at them, not also pearl, also a teardrop. So given the country's some of the past, you can say that we have a very difficult past. We had a 30-year war, started in 1983 and ended in 2009. One of the most brutal war in the world, really. We had this. It's a ethnic war. Minority community. Some of the rebels in the minority community wanted to separate the country, and the government forces was also at time very brutal at that time. And it said that about 60,000 to 70,000 people have died, mostly civilians from the war due to violence from both sides. And also this war was waged by what we call the liberation tigers, Tamil tigers. They invented this suicide bombing. Some of you have seen these things, even in US with the World Trade Center bombing and all that. They invented these things in Sri Lanka. So it was a very sad and tragic history, but it was ended in 2009. And then we also had student-led, mostly youth-led rebellions in 1971 that killed many of our young people. And in 1989, we had the same issue where another large number of people were killed. So there's a lot of tragedy. We had some ethnic conflicts and all that. But again, people are trying their best to work together. We have a lot of mixed marriages from different ethnic communities, different religions, but still there's a lot of work to be done. So that's another part of our country's situation. But again, like I said, we also have a lot of good things to be proud about. I mean, we have a good literacy rate, and about 80%, 90% literacy rate we have. And the women and men are both literate. I mean, if you look at the university, we have equal number of female and male students in universities. Children, male, female, both have same opportunities to study in schools. And of course, some of you know, we elected our world's first female prime minister in 1960s. Nobody had even thought about this before that time. So that was a proud moment for Sri Lanka, electing the first female prime minister, first female leader in the world, really, in 1960s. And then we later elected the first female president, executive president as well. So these are some of these things. And then I think there are other things that we can be proud, but at the same time, the country is right now going through a very difficult time. We are going through a very difficult economic situation where, we don't have a lot of income coming in. So countries in debt to China, to India, to some other countries. So the International Monetary Fund is trying to help us, but it's a long process. So due to that, the country is going through difficult time. People are going through difficult time. Some of you probably have already know these things by reading. But again, people have a lot of resiliency. We know, I'm sure people will, somehow survive. The country will survive because we have gone through more difficult periods in our history. So I think there's one good thing is our young people today are very innovative, very vocal at the same time. They are looking for just society. They don't tolerate these corrupt politicians. They want a transparency in government. So there's some democratic movement is developing in the country. Young people are taking lead in this thing. So there's some positive signs. Of course, some of our older politicians would not agree with that, but there's some positive signs going on for democracy, for transparency, because in our 75 history, the local politicians did not manage the economy well. So that's one of the reasons why we are in this situation. But again, like I said, the young people, we have a lot of educated, smart, innovative young people are in the country. So that's a very positive thing, a hopeful sign. Again, like I said, there's so much to be celebrated at the same time. There are so many things that need to happen so that the country can get back on its footings in many ways. But again, there's a lot of goodwill. People are trying their best to forget the past, these ethnic conflicts, and try to work together, trying to live together. For example, in my own bigger family, we have people in our family from all different ethnic backgrounds, different religions. So that's somehow that interaction, interconnection is something that brings some hope that somehow we could live together, hopefully. So again, we can talk more. If you have some more questions, I'm happy to answer. And like I said, this is just a very tiny teaser about Sri Lanka, and I'm sure you have some other questions as well. I'm happy to answer, and I'm sure Shavi can also chip in and share what her views as well. So that I'll stop there, and then we'll open for any questions you may have.
Yes, that was awesome. That was a very, I can't believe you were able to tie in so many different areas in that in that short time, but that was very, very informative. I think before I open it up for questions, I have a very, very short video to show you. It's like 1.5 minutes. So let me do that. All right. So I think we're ready to open it up for questions. Any comments? Anything anyone wants to add?
I think there was a question in the chat from Tanya about tigers.
Oh, let me just, yes, Tanya had a question. So she asks if, so tigers were, she's asking whether the tigers were inspired by Che Guevara.
Che Guevara.
Che Guevara.
Some distant memory when you mention tigers. It's funny what we know and don't remember, but maybe it's maybe it's same period that things were happening and I'm confused.
No, no, Tigers, they're not a Marxist group like, Che Guevara's group. I think it's mostly ethnic, obviously trying to get more power for the ethnic community. So obviously it's a long story, but the ethnic community has some legitimate concerns because of their language and all that, and some of the opportunities. So they were discriminated to a certain extent by the majority community. So instead of getting into the democratic process, they've tried to, use the violence. And because of that, they waged this war. So again, it's a war that, a lot of people were killed. There's a lot of suicide bombings. There's civilians were targeted. There's bombings in the religious places and public places. So that's that. And so it was in 2009, this was defeated militarily by the Sri Lankan government, really. So it's nothing to do with the Marxist ideology. But again, like I said, it's mostly ethnic, trying to get more power and divide the country, basically.
Yeah, and once war started and it lasts so long.
Right.
Nobody remembers how it started. It just, everybody at war.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I was growing up in the 80s. I remember we couldn't go to school for a few months. I think we had to stay at home, and then even when we were allowed back in school, we couldn't, because typically we wear uniforms, like everybody wears the same standard clothing, and then we couldn't wear that because we were supposed to wear like regular colored clothing and go in, because they didn't want anybody to know that the schools were open, because they didn't want the schools to be targeted. Thankfully we've never had any bombings at schools as far as I know, but yeah, that time was a pretty scary time, not knowing when like somebody goes out, whether, because suicide bombers could be anywhere, right? Yeah, it was terrifying. Yeah, I think we had another question. I think I saw something coming in. Just go back. So Gail says, wonderful overview of past and present. Thank you for celebrating Sri Lanka's Independence Day history with us. Rajashri says, enough of this, let's all plan a visit. Yes, you should plan a visit.
I mean, my family was admiring from behind.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Somebody
Yeah,
wants to know
it's kind
school
of
system. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's something about the school system. So ER Saint Germain asks, are most children able to go to school? If so, that is yes, absolutely. I mean, Chitral, you can talk about this too. But that was, we've always had like one of the highest literacy rates. Would I be correct if I said in the world? Yeah.
Yeah, one of the highest, yeah.
Yeah, because education up to education's free up to university. It's free, so anybody, and girls, everybody, any gender, can go in.
Yeah, there's no discrimination. Boys, girls get the same opportunity. And then even the university level, I think the ratio is, if you go look at university levels, mostly 50-50 ratio. I mean, sometimes the female ratio is a little higher than the male ratio. Obviously, that's maybe who's smarter than, maybe that's, I don't know. But again, so there's no, so like somebody said, I think it's the hope for the future. And I think, because we have a lot of debts and all that, it's difficult. There's a lot of difficulties, but hopefully, we can have a lot of hope because of the younger generation. They are very smart, very savvy, very innovative. So hopefully that's, gives us some hope. Yeah.
So I have a question. This is Mina. Because I think over here people don't differentiate between different areas of that world, like Indian, Sri Lankan, Bangladesh, Pakistan, all of that. What is unique about Sri Lanka that people should know about that separates the Sri Lankans from these other countries or cultures, I should say?
Well, I think there's a lot of similarities as well. I mean, for example, with India, and also there's some differences. We have, because of the closeness of India and Sri Lanka, we got a lot of influence from Sri Lanka, India, our culture, our food, and a lot of other things. Even obviously the Buddhism came from India as well. But then, for example, sometimes, we have all these things. People think we are from India. I mean, so there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes they for some reason, think they are similar like Indians. But I think sometimes we have to correct them, saying, no, we are not from India. We are from Sri Lanka. Nothing against India, but, that's who we are. And asked about the differences, I would say, even the food, for example, our food is more spicy in terms of the hot spicy than the Indian food. And then there is a lot of even our music, the dancing, our different other things have a little bit Indian influence, but then we have created our own as well. So again, like, I would say that, sometimes, I have this funny thing, but sometimes people say, oh, you are India, you're from India. And when you say, no, I'm not from India, I'm Sri Lanka. So people say, oh, so what's the difference? India, Sri Lanka, what's the difference? People say that. So, sometimes I used to ask somebody from US, oh, are you from Canada? Then the people get a little offended. I say, I'm from US. And then say, oh, yeah, what's the difference? Canada, US. So, but, I think right now we are very sensitive to these things. We should understand who you assume that, that whether that person from what is the origin of that person. So, but again, that's, it's all there. I mean, people have a lot of this kind of, assumptions. But again, I don't have a very, if I can talk more, but about the differences and the similarities, but I think I'll stop here. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say that Indian food has oftentimes tried to kill me, so I can't imagine how much spicier Sri Lankan food would be.
It's really good. It's very well rounded. I've had Sri Lankan food many, many times. Oh my God, it's really good. It has various layers to it, and the cashew and coconut as the primary gravy thickeners. It's just lovely. I have a question or a comment or whatever. So, I'm from India, and I've, experienced the closeness with Sri Lanka and the shared history and the politics that India has had with Sri Lanka. And both of us have shared some violence. How do you, as people of Sri Lankan origin, reconcile with the violence and kind of go forward, because there's a certain resiliency that I see in people. And when you live abroad, the notion of what goes on in the home country, it hits you harder. And and you tend to take a stand. How do you reconcile with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult question. I think when we are in Sri Lanka, sometimes you don't even think too much because you're in the survival mode.
Right.
You want to survive somehow. You know, when you come out of the country only, sometimes you get scared that this is where we lived, but then you are there, it's not the same because, you just want to, just somehow day-to-day survival. But when you look at objectively, sometimes we feel bad for the plight of people sometimes, especially there's a lot of poverty in Sri Lanka. Also because of the hardships. But again, like you said, during that war time, I think most of the families know somebody who got killed from either your family, or from relatives, or somebody you know. There's so many people have died, so you can relate in many ways to that war. But I think you kind of get used to that in many ways, and then learn to live. I mean, you cannot live in the past. You cannot live in hatred, because for myself, I had to go through certain things because of my human rights work. But then once you out of the country, you kind of tend to forget these things, and then you want to kind of, at least because you have a love for your motherland. I mean, although you are away from your country, you still have some certain connection.
Okay.
I think this is true for most of the first generation immigrants. We are kind of keeping one foot in our country we were born, and the other foot in our country where we live. So it's a difficult thing because you want to, because for example, I don't want to go and live in Sri Lanka, I don't think, because I love this country, US. But then at the same time, I want to do as much as possible in many ways for my country also. But I think our children, second generation immigrants, I think differently. So to your question, I think, so you kind of begin to learn to forgive in many ways for some of the things that you have or your family had gone through. At the same time, to reconcile many things. There are certain realities that we cannot change. At the same time, if you don't forgive or forget, not forget, but forgive at least, you cannot be at peace, I think. So that's what we are trying to do. Hopefully, many people will do that, but then there's a lot of things that we need to reconcile, because certain things we have to talk about some of these things. A lot of people who are disappeared during the war, we don't have an account of these people, and some parents are still waiting for their children to come home. Maybe they are dead. So those things are there. So these are the things that there's a suggestion that we might need a kind of a truth and reconciliation kind of a process like South Africa, where we kind of talk about these things and at least have an accountability. But it's not still there yet. But hopefully that kind of process will bring more reconciliation and hopefully some healing to the country. Yeah.
I can see that Rob has his hand up. But before I go to Rob, I just want to say I really love this comment. Gail Rosenfeld has said, enjoying my Dilma Ceylon tea and Maliban chocolate biscuits this morning during your beautiful Christmas, Sri Lankan session. So it's, yeah, I don't know how you got the Maliban chocolate biscuits, but you should tell us. But Rob, you had your hand up. Would you like to ask a question?
Yes, I just I want to thank Chitral, if I pronounced that correctly.
Yep.
For your very mature and wise reflection on the realities. It seems predation is a characteristic of our species, no matter where we are. Unfortunately, maybe someday we will smarten up. Yeah, Tanya, I know. So I had written a question in the chat about what is the United States policy toward Sri Lanka, and not that we have a great amount of influence here sitting in our chairs in Ashland, but how should the United States policy toward Sri Lanka change? How might we improve and help Sri Lanka for the future? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a wonderful question. I think, again, like I said, you can talk a lot about that question, but very briefly, I mean, we have bilateral relations of US and Sri Lanka for a very long time. In many times, the US has supported us, especially during the war. Even the US has given the satellite technology that will help us, the government, to sometimes stop certain terrorist activities. So that's there. But again, there's always more could be done. But in terms of even during this time when we are going through this economic hardships through the IMF, US is trying to help us a little bit because obviously we know the International Monetary Fund, the US has a lot of leverage in that. And last week, this Victoria Newland, the Undersecretary of the Political activities in US, she was in Sri Lanka talking with the government leaders and trying to see how the US could support us in this time. They are giving a lot of support for children right now because of during these economic hardships. Just found out that a lot of children are malnourished and going through hungry. Those children who had 3 meals now having 2 meals, or those had 2 meals had 1 meal. Children in the schools are going through tough times due to food shortage. So the American government is giving a lot of support for children for their food, the meals and all that. So that's a good thing. Again, we don't get a lot of financial support from America, but they are trying to help us in terms of democratic reforms, trying to encourage the government to support the democratic rights of the people, as well as to preserve the human rights and other normal press freedom and all that. So that's there. But again, like the India is a regional power. So even the US doesn't want to antagonize India. So they're kind of trying to say to us that work with India. Obviously, in our country, we have two major forces like India and China. So these are so obviously US doesn't like us to get more closer to China. So there's a little power politics there. again, I think I mean at this point, I mean, for personally, I don't have any complaints for US. I think they're trying to do what can, but but again, Sri Lanka is not a very strategic place for US to be, do more, I guess. But they're true. They have a small group of countries. They have put together US, Australia, Japan, India. They work together to support Sri Lanka at this point. So there's some positive things happening, but again, there's more to be done. More can be done, but we cannot complain what they're doing at the moment.
And I think Karen had a question as well. What is tourism like in Sri Lanka, and who visits?
Yeah, I think it's one of the major industry in Sri Lanka. One of our major foreign exchange earners for Sri Lanka from tourism. We get a lot of tourists from Europe, not from many from America, but a lot of tourism from Russia and Eastern Europe as well, and Germany, countries like Japan, China, India. Because you have this wonderful thing, like in few hours you can go from warmer climate to cooler climate. I mean, only in Sri Lanka you can do that, and then sometimes you have within 4 or 5 hours you can visit the, say, natural forest or all this, and then go to beaches. I mean, so it's a very because it's an island nation, you have all this. And so obviously, Sri Lanka is really trying to promote tourism. There's all kinds of packages. The ecotourism is really catching up. Then we have this Ayurvedic tourism, where people can get into this herbal therapy, Ayurvedic and all that. So there's all kinds of different things. And the only thing for US is that it's very long flight. Really, it's take about almost 1 day to get to Sri Lanka. So that's little discouraging for people. But still, once you go there, people are very friendly. It's very safe. I mean, there's no bombing or anything right now. Little bit, there's economic difficulties, but for tourists, I don't think they have to face all that. But so, like I said, it's a nice culture, it's a nice food, temperature, tropical temperature. I mean, there's all these things there. So I think, if you go, you'll love it.
Yeah, I just want to add that when I was growing up, there weren't too many American tourists, but I think that number has increased, even though it does take like a long time to travel there, but it's really just like Chitral said, in just a space of a few hours, you can go from the beach to see the elephants, to see the mountains, to see the cultural sites from like 2,000 years ago. It's value for money. I know that, because if you go to a hotel, it's full board. My kids, like, they can't believe it. Like, they think about going on trips over here, and we'll get like a B&B, or not a B&B, like if we get like breakfast, it'll be like a continental. And then over there, it's like a full spread. You get that for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And it'll be like 1/4 of the price that I would pay over here for a hotel. So it's amazing. So, if you're thinking of doing like a trip, I really think that you have a look at the country.
Mm-hmm. So we're just about out of time. I just wanted to come back and say thank you, Chitral. This was really fascinating. As you can see from the chat, people have been really enjoying it as well. I feel like I should go there. I know we've had a program on tea, and I think that my understanding is that they're doing more tea tours and the plantations and all that would be fascinating. So thank you for being here and just the wealth of knowledge, but also I'd like to thank Rajeshri and Shavindri for hosting and moderating and bringing this program to the Ashland Library, because having this sort of like hyper local programming is so interesting and important for us. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much to Chitral and Rajashri and Meena for organizing this as well.
Sure,
Thank you so
thanks.
much. That was one. Definitely going.
Right. And for everybody who joined us today, I really appreciate that you took your cold Saturday morning to spend with us, and glad this was virtual. I hope you all have a wonderful day. And if you do travel, hit Sri Lanka.
Thank you.
Meena, will the recording be available to all of us?
Yes, I will send out a recording link as soon as I upload it to our YouTube channel, hopefully sometime today, because I'm not going anywhere. Chitral, again, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Chitral. That was fascinating.
Yep. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.